When most people think of a global crisis, whether it's a pandemic, a financial meltdown, or a geopolitical shock, they imagine fear, loss, and chaos. But behind the scenes, for a very small group of powerful corporations and investors, crisis has quietly become the most profitable business model humanity has ever created. The world has entered an era where instability is not a threat, it's an opportunity. And the richer you are, the more you benefit from it. Imagine a system where every emergency instantly reshuffles wealth upward. A lockdown shuts down millions of small businesses, yet the biggest tech companies add trillions in market cap. A supply chain collapse triggers shortages globally, yet shipping giants report record-breaking profits. Stock markets crash, then bounce back even higher, fueled by stimulus money. Ordinary people lose jobs, homes, and savings, while billionaires gain more in a single year than entire nations. This is not an accident, it is a pattern, and it happens because crisis concentrates power. The companies that already dominate their industries gain even more leverage when smaller competitors collapse. Governments, overwhelmed by panic, turn to the same handful of corporations for support, whether it's logistics, pharmaceuticals, technology, or finance. And every time they do, those corporations grow even stronger. But the most important part of this story is subtle. Crises reshape human behavior. Fear accelerates digital adoption. Lockdowns force dependence on online platforms. Scarcity pushes people toward subscription systems, gig work, and automated services. Every one of these changes benefits the companies sitting at the top. Crisis, in today's world, is not just a disruption. It is a catalyst, a wealth engine, and a tool that reshapes society in ways that permanently favor the elite. When the pandemic hit, most people imagined a world where governments, institutions, and corporations would operate in emergency mode, prioritizing public health over profits. But what actually emerged was something very different. An entirely new class of companies designed specifically to profit from chaos. These weren't traditional businesses responding to market demand. They were crisis corporations, organizations whose revenue, power, and influence grew only when society was breaking down. During lockdowns, when millions of small businesses collapsed, corporations specializing in delivery, e-commerce, digital logistics, medical supplies, and cloud infrastructure experienced the fastest expansion in modern history. Their profits weren't the result of innovation in normal times. They were the result of being positioned perfectly for catastrophe. They had the infrastructure, data networks, political connections, and supply chain dominance needed to step in precisely when the world froze. But the real shift wasn't just financial, it was structural. Crisis corporations began influencing policy, shaping public behavior, and even determining which industries would live or die. The more unpredictable the world became, the more valuable they became. Every new variant spike, every new lockdown, every supply chain disruption acted like fuel for their growth engine. And once governments realized how dependent society had become on these corporations for food, communication, employment, medicine, entertainment, a symbiotic relationship formed. Public crises created opportunities, corporations delivered solutions, governments relied on them, and citizens became long-term users with no alternatives. In just 2 years, the global economy subtly transformed from a competitive marketplace into a crisis-driven ecosystem. And the companies that dominated this ecosystem didn't wait for chaos. They planned for it, positioned themselves for it, and profited from it. The world entered an era where stability is bad for business, but crisis is the ultimate growth strategy. One of the least discussed consequences of the pandemic was the way it accelerated a silent global takeover, an economic reshaping where a handful of megacorporations captured entire industries. Before 2020, markets were already leaning toward consolidation. But once the crisis hit, the pace didn't just increase, it exploded. Small businesses shut down by the millions, mid-sized companies suffocated under rising costs, and local suppliers collapsed under supply chain chaos. Meanwhile, giants with deep pockets, endless credit, and political leverage expanded like never before. This is what economists quietly call the monopoly effect. It's a scenario where economic hardship doesn't reduce corporate power, it multiplies it. While people lost jobs and savings, major corporations gained market share, revenue, and political influence. Think about it. When small restaurants closed, big chains took over. When local retailers died, e-commerce giants absorbed their customers. When traditional suppliers failed, global conglomerates stepped in with automated logistics and massive infrastructure. The pandemic created the perfect environment for giants to crush competition. Government rules, lockdown restrictions, and emergency mandates, though meant to protect public health, ended up benefiting those with the resources to operate under strict conditions. Only the largest companies could afford compliance costs, workforce shifts, digital transitions, and rapid scaling. As a result, by the end of the crisis, the world witnessed the sharpest concentration of wealth and power in modern history. Industries like tech, healthcare, food distribution, pharmaceuticals, e-commerce, logistics, and entertainment became dominated by just a few players. These companies now influence what we buy, what we see, what we earn, and even what we believe. The crisis didn't just create billionaires, it created unshakable empires, and the world now lives under their shadow. When most of the world was locked inside their homes, struggling to keep their jobs, businesses, and mental health intact, a tiny group of corporations and individuals experienced something entirely different: the greatest wealth surge in modern history. The pandemic didn't just create chaos. It created the perfect environment for a new class of billionaires to emerge almost overnight. And the reason is simple: crisis concentrates power. While small businesses were shutting down permanently, global corporations with digital infrastructures were scaling faster than ever. E-commerce giants saw decade-long growth compressed into a single year. Every lockdown, every restriction, and every shift toward online behavior funneled billions of dollars into the hands of companies perfectly positioned to serve a world that could no longer move freely. Food delivery platforms, online marketplaces, remote work software, pharmaceuticals, logistics networks, every one of them became essential overnight. At the same time, governments printed record amounts of money to support the economy. But the majority of this liquidity flowed upward, inflating stock prices, boosting tech valuations, and turning already rich founders into ultra-rich titans. When the market surged, so did their net worth. The rich weren't working harder. They were simply connected to the financial systems that were benefiting from unprecedented stimulus. Meanwhile, ordinary people faced layoffs, reduced hours, rising rent, soaring food prices, and disappearing savings. The contrast was astonishing. As billions struggled, more than 500 new billionaires were created between 2020 and 2022 alone. Some industries built fortunes from vaccines, some from data, some from digital dependency, but all of them benefited from a world forced into a new kind of economic behavior. The pandemic didn't just expose inequality, it accelerated it. And the wealth created during this crisis didn't spread outward. It pooled at the very top, reshaping global power in ways we are only starting to understand. The rise of crisis made billionaires isn't just a story about wealth. It's a structural shift that will redefine how economies, societies, and even governments operate for decades. When wealth surges during a global disaster, it does not remain neutral. It transforms into influence. The power to lobby policies, to set global priorities, to buy failed industries for pennies, and to reshape markets in ways ordinary citizens cannot resist or reverse. These new billionaires, forged during pandemics and emergencies, often use their capital to acquire assets that were once considered untouchable: healthcare networks, data companies, food supply chains, pharmaceutical manufacturing, logistics systems, and even private energy infrastructures. The more essential the sector, the more valuable it becomes during a crisis, and this gives them unprecedented control over the backbone of society. The long-term danger is not their wealth alone, but the dependency they create. When governments rely on private giants for vaccines, medical supplies, emergency infrastructure, or data systems, they lose autonomy. Public institutions become weaker, while private power grows bolder. The line between state and corporation slowly blurs. For the average person, this means living in a world where basic necessities are increasingly dictated by a handful of entities with no democratic oversight. Prices, access, availability, and even eligibility become corporate decisions, not public rights. In the end, the pandemic didn't just create billionaires. It created a new ruling class. A class built not on innovation, but on the failure of global systems. And as long as crises continue, their power will only grow stronger.